Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mighty Oaks Show. So glad to have you with us today and looking forward to a wonderful conversation, which I'll talk about in just a second. But before we jump into that, you have been, I'm sure, like the rest of us have, consuming all kinds of media, and maybe you, like me, are trying to figure out what to cut out because there's a lot of stuff we need to cut out. But there are some things we need to add in, and I would encourage you, if you have not yet added in the Mighty Oaks Show and the content from the Mighty Oaks Foundation into your regular diet of content and communication, you need to do that. And the best way to do that is to go to our YouTube channel. If you have not yet gone to the YouTube channel, go there. You can hit subscribe, and better yet, hit the notification bell. That lets you know when more content comes online. You can leave a comment, share it out, ask any questions that you might have for us. We'd love to get that from you. And I know many of you are watching on YouTube. Thank you for doing that. For those of you that are not, perhaps you're listening to the podcast or over on Mojo 50 with our friends there. Thank you for doing that as well. Glad to have these relationships. And I would encourage you, when this episode is over, jump over to YouTube, search for the Mighty Oaks Foundation or Mighty Oaks. You'll find us there, and subscribe to the channel. A lot of great content we would love to share with you. And excited about all of the good things that are happening. And I know there are a lot of crazy things happening in the world, but there are a lot of good things happening as well. And excited to share that with you. Well, today's episode is a little bit different. If you have been watching the show or listening to the show, you know that just a couple of weeks ago, we did an episode where I hosted a conversation with the leadership team of the Mighty Oaks Foundation, and we covered really a broad range of questions and issues, and really enjoyed that. Today, we're going to have a conversation similar to that one, only with the women's team, the ladies' team of the Mighty Oaks Foundation. We have programs here at the Mighty Oaks Foundation for men and for women, and our women's team is going to talk to you today. The discussion will be led by my wife, Susanna Stallnaker. She's our women's director here at the Mighty Oaks Foundation, and a number of the leaders there, and the perspective that they provide on many of the things that we're living through right now is a great one. You're going to enjoy this conversation, and look forward to talking to you when it's all over.
For this episode of the Mighty Oaks Show. My name is Susanna Stalnecker. I am the Women's Program Director for Mighty Oaks Warrior Programs, Mighty Oaks Foundation. And I'm really excited today to have with me a group of the ladies from our Women's Legacy Program team. And I just wanted to thank you, ladies, for joining us. And we have some things that we're going to talk about today in reflection of last year, the year that we've just been through, and also looking forward to this next year and kind of how things maybe are looking to still be the same in some way for some of us. And so we're just kind of going to do some reflecting, looking forward, and our hope is just to be an encouragement to you guys today. So we're going to get into some questions, and I wanted to introduce the ladies that are here with us. We have Kathy Robichaux. Kathy Robichaux is the co-founder of the Mighty Oaks Foundation, and she is involved in our women's program. And we actually she started the women's program, and we are now able to be on this team together. And then we also have with us Laurel Scott. She is one of our team leaders in our women's program. Amanda Hamilton, also one of our team leaders. Ann Dodd, she's a team leader in our women's program as well. Shannon Morrell is a team leader, and she is going to be going through the mentor training for our women's program to be one of the mentors at our sessions. Heidi Andela is a team leader, and then we have Julie Coate. She's a team leader for our women's program as well. And we have this group of ladies here, and we all have different kind of life perspectives. We have kids of different ages, been married for different amounts of time. We live all over the country. And I'm just so thankful for these ladies that are joining us via Zoom today. So if you'll just bear with us as we get through some of these questions. And the first question I just wanted to ask you guys is, as we look back at 2020, we're kind of 1 week into the new year. As we look back at 2020, what was one of the biggest challenges that you faced during this year? I'm going to start with Kathy. If you could share with us, what is one of the biggest challenges of 2020 for you?
Hi, Susanna. Yes, I can do that. So last year, Chad and I completely became empty nesters. So adding empty nesting on top of isolation was a bit lonely. So I would say in 2020, just dealing with that loneliness was hard for us.
I think loneliness is probably something that a lot of people dealt with last year because there's so much, and we'll talk about this a little bit more too. I think isolation was almost encouraged too. So on top of that, you're already also so isolated. And then with what you guys were dealing with, that cannot have helped.
That's right.
What about you, Anne? What was one of the biggest challenges you faced in 2020?
I would say for me, it was just not allowing kind of depression and anxiety to take hold for me.
Mhm.
That's something I've struggled with in the past. So I kind of know the warning signs and the triggers for myself. So I think I was really conscious of that as soon as it kind of looked like we're going to be going into this for a while and it's not going to end. So I did try to be really proactive with that, just knowing my experiences with that in the past. So I kind of tried to hit it head on, and that was really helpful for me, just kind of doing kind of the steps that I know to kind of get me out of depression, anxiety. And some of that was, I read some books that were really great on those topics, Bible study, reaching out to people. I have a couple people that I really trust that have dealt with depression before. And so that alone was really a huge one for me, of just being able to call on them and say, hey, I'm feeling a little anxious or depressed, what would you recommend? And just getting their prayer and stuff like that was really helpful for me. So
That's good. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really good.
Yeah.
Laurel, you're kind of in a unique situation in that you are an elementary school principal. So given that situation, what was one of the biggest challenges you faced in 2020?
Well, I've dealt with a lot of anxiety and stress this year, making the move from the classroom to being a building administrator. The biggest challenge for me is dealing with people who have very different opinions on where we should be and what we're doing, all while trying to keep students' needs and education at the forefront and remaining in person. It's been managing that stress load with my family has been very, very challenging.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a pretty unique challenge that maybe a lot of people could relate with, as maybe on the other side of being parent, trying to, have that relationship with the teacher when it's not really able to happen face to face. So that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. Heidi, what about you? What's one of your challenges that you faced in 2020?
One of the challenges that I faced was my mom. She had injured her Achilles tendon. And so she was in a rehab, and then also in the process of moving to a different apartment, not necessarily being able to be there with her through all of that. My hands were tied. We were stuck. So it was just frustrating, she was going through that. Thankfully, she has a really good church family who were able to step in and fill that gap, but it still wasn't the same as being there with her to help her get through all of that.
Yeah, definitely challenging. Yep. Julie is joining us from Montana. Julie, you are have been face to face with a lot of this pandemic that's been going through. Julie is a nurse. And so Julie, what was the challenge that you faced?
When the pandemic first was advertised as hitting us, I was actually on the way back from Mexico on it. I'd been down there on a medical mission, and then the whole thing went right into a Mighty Oak session. And I would say hands down, the biggest thing that I faced was fear, fighting fear. Just the fear of, COVID, and they made it sound so dangerous, and the isolation, and then just working through that, God's word is true. And it didn't stop being true right before COVID hit. It's always true. And this is what his word said. And just really trying to work through all that and stand on his word and refuse to walk in fear.
Yeah, that's good. I think fear is a big thing for a lot of people right now because there's so many unknowns. I think there's a lot of things more known now than were at the beginning, like you said. And fear has definitely been a challenge. And I've found that to be so true for myself as well, is just fighting that fear where, like I said, of the unknown, because there's so many things that we don't know or that we haven't known. So fear, that's huge. I think that's been a huge challenge for a lot of people too. And then Amanda, you have kind of some younger kids at home as well. What's the challenge that you guys have faced or that you personally have faced with all of that?
So I think piggybacking on with everybody else, isolation is probably the biggest challenge that I faced. And in the moments when I struggled the most, that's when I would cling to the truth. The enemy seeks to divide us and to keep us isolated. And so I would specifically and purposefully reach out and make connections through whichever means were available at the time. And a lot of times I just found myself going back and rewatching sermons from my church on their website and just kind of cleaning up my notes, my kind of personality. It worked well for that, yeah. But that's how I stayed. I stayed in the truth and staying connected. You know, we were made for connection, not for isolation. And so just holding on to that and really struggling and working through it is something that got me through.
Yeah. Now, on the flip side of that, and we'll just start with you, Amanda, on this next question. On the flip side of that, what would be one of the lessons that you, maybe one of the biggest lessons that you had in 2020? Maybe the other side of the challenge, maybe there was a lesson in it for you. And some of you guys have already kind of shared, this was my challenge, but this is what I did to overcome that. What would be one of the biggest lessons that you took away from the last year?
So, my dad passed away in June of 2019. So last year still held a lot of firsts for our family. But I would say that one of the biggest lessons that I learned, it happened just before my dad passed away. And I was having a conversation with my mom, and she was commenting on the hope that she had in the doctors. And it's so hard to know what to say in that situation when you're trying to comfort somebody and, be there. And so I prayed and I asked God to just help me know what to say. And he reminded me that our hope must be in him. We can't put it in people. We can't put it in politicians or the government or anything. Our hope has to be in God, and our faith has to be there. And that was one of the biggest lessons that kept coming back through the chaos of last year is where does your hope, where does your faith lie? And I would say that's my answer.
That's good. Yeah, that's really good. Laurel, what about you?
It seems so crazy to think about last year and last March when everything kind of shut down because that seems like a lifetime ago. I think I've probably aged 2 years in a fall semester.
Yeah, I think we all feel like that. Probably.
So
yes.
Yeah. And I had some, I was transitioning from one job to another. And I was actually just talking to my mother about this last night, just talking about the current climate and things like that. And I'm just so reminded about the sovereignty of God. I had a huge lesson. And at one point I had a friend tell me a couple of years ago when I didn't get a job I thought I really wanted. He just said, it's the sovereignty of God, Laurel. And I'm like, okay, that's really easy to say when you've got your heart set on something, just to tell somebody, well, that's God's will, But a few years later, I was offered this position, and I no longer had the desire to have the other position. God totally changed my heart. And had something going the whole time, and just knowing that we serve a sovereign God, and it's absolutely amazing to know that he's in complete control, and I can do what I need to do, and I focus on what I need to focus on. But at the end of the day, my energy should not be spent on worrying about controlling the things that are beyond my control.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you. Heidi?
So I guess one of the biggest lessons that I learned, I tend to be a little bit of an introvert. So being isolated at first was like, okay, that's not too bad of a thing. But the relationships and the connections that I had and still have with other women, like I was missing that. And so I think the biggest lesson for me was just realizing that we're not meant to be alone, and that God has wired us to need other women in our life. And I guess really that's just the biggest thing is that connection that I think that I need it as much as I do.
Yeah, that's good. I think it was Amanda that said that we weren't made for isolation. We were made for connection. And I think that's really, really important for a lot of people to remember during a time where, like we said, isolation is so encouraged. And I think you're so right. Connection is huge. And that's one of the things I learned during this time too, is just the importance and the need that we have, that we're just made that way. That really stood out. Anne, what was one of the biggest lessons you learned from the last year?
For me, one of the biggest lessons I learned was just learning to relinquish control. So much of life is outside of our control, and we know that. But I think in normal circumstances outside of 2020, maybe, we kind of still think we're controlling everything or keeping all those balls in there and everything going. So just really realizing so much is out of my control, and just learning to kind of relinquish that to the Lord. He's abundantly faithful, and he continues to provide even in the midst of all this. So even when everything seems to be falling apart, just knowing he's on the throne, and we talked about his sovereignty, just knowing that has given me a lot of peace. And so just the reminder that I need to surrender to that to him daily. And then another one that was really huge to me, I talked a little bit about my struggles with anxiety. In the spring, one of the things I did was read a book that was based on Philippians 4. And it discussed kind of different ways to combat anxiety. And one of those was gratitude. And so I'd say gratitude, having an attitude of gratitude, just kind of having a heart posture that has been something I've been really intentional more than I had in the past with. I've tried every night to kind of list 5 things I'm grateful for. And I've been amazed at how that simple act has really kind of shifted my perspective from everything that's going wrong and everything we're missing out on and everything we're losing, to just being thankful. Like there's still so much to be thankful for, and God has been so good and abundantly provided during this time, and he's used these circumstances for good. So that gratitude, I think, also has been something really big for me.
Yeah, that's good. It's difficult in the middle of a time like we kind of have been through or kind of are still in, to remember that God's still doing things and that there's still a lot of good happening in the midst of all of that. So yeah, that's really good. Gratitude. Shannon?
For me, the lessons I learned tie into the biggest challenge that came with the time was I have a senior in high school, and I have a senior, junior, and a sophomore, and those experiences that they thought they were going to have, and you get to do all these fun things with your senior. And so the lesson I learned was my reaction can change everything.
Right.
My son is already stressed out or dealing with uncertainty, and there were times he'd share things with me, and so if my reaction was stress, it added more stress. If he came to me and instead of just listening, I was trying to solve it all for him, it made it more stressful. So it really helped me navigate my reaction to help him really build more resiliency. It's uncertain. You might not be able to go back to school your senior year. You might not have a prom. How do we walk through this? How do I just hear his heart and just be there for him? And then I found when I did that, instead of putting more on him or my stress, he was able to walk away and, be like, okay, this is what it is. And so that was really it. My reaction can change everything, good or bad, so being mindful of how I reacted and knowing that my children are watching me during this time as well.
Yeah, that's a good lesson. Julie?
The biggest lesson for me was to realize that none of this has taken God by surprise. There's a verse that I've read a jillion times, said God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. And I've read that and I think, okay, fear is kind of like an emotion or like, just like happiness or joy. And then we recently heard this pastor say, no, right there, God says fear is an actual spirit. I'd never thought of fear as being a spirit. And so there's so many times we let ourselves be entertained by fear. We listen to what fear is telling us, and you're always going to go the wrong way if you listen to fear. And so he said, we need to take authority over that fear. We've been given that power by God to take authority over that fear. He said, kick it to the curb. And so I guess for me, the key verse for me this whole year has been when Jesus said, take every thought captive to him, every thought, as soon as they hit, take it captive. And so learning to do that has really helped alleviate a lot of stress. I'll start getting amped up and it's like, no, I bring that thought captive to you, Jesus. You got this. I have, like Laurel said, I have no control over this stuff, but you can take care of it. And worrying is not going to help at all. So.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Julie. What's one of the biggest lessons that you learned in 2020, Kathy?
What everybody's saying here is really that fear and that control was definitely more so fear on my end. Control is a big thing of Chad. So being home with him a lot, learning that you can't control things, and just like Shannon said, the reaction, the way you react to it. So the way he wanted to control things, I knew I couldn't react to it the way he couldn't react in a way that everything sounded, the things that we were seeing on TV or just hearing in general. And with Chad being so involved in what's going on with our politics, mainly so that he can really fight for our veterans, we had to, I heard a lot. So that caused a lot of fear, but ultimately in the midst of all that, learning to trust God's plan in all of this and all this ugliness of what's happening, of what has happened, what is fear going to do for us? What is control going to do for us? It's not going to do anything. So just learning to trust that God has a plan in the midst of all of this has been definitely something that I've stood on. I just wish that he would show us right now in the midst of this and the fear of leading into 2021 of what's 2021 going to look like. Just having to go right back to God has a plan.
Yeah. I think most of us thought that we would be done, at the end of 2020, and we're moving past that, but I think we're starting to see that's not the case.
Yeah, 2021 did not,
no,
it did not mean all that was over.
No, it has not yet delivered.
It's just an extended amount of time for us to trust in the Lord, I guess, now. So
yeah, I think you're so right. I really think you're right with that. So, now that we've kind of talked about the challenges that we face, the lessons, maybe some of the lessons that we learned, what are, getting a little more specific here, what are some of the unique challenges just to the family during a time like this that we've just been through? Like I said, all of us here, I share with everyone, we're all kind of in different phases of life. We have kids of different ages. Kathy shared she's an empty nester. We said Laurel and still has she has smaller children. Amanda has a few smaller children as well at home. So we're all kind of in different phases. So I kind of wanted to look at this kind of where we all stand. What are some unique challenges maybe that you have faced in your family personally, or just that you feel like families in general have faced during the year that we've just been through and the time in which we still find ourselves? Kathy, what has it been like for your family uniquely?
Yeah, so Haley, who's my only daughter, she's my middle child. She made a huge life change this year and is engaged to be married. Or she made that life change last year and now is engaged to be married. So when she left, that was right when everything got shut down. So the plan she had and her fiance had been definitely went a different direction. So and that's kind of how it was for two of my three kids. Hayden had kind of the same situation where just what am I doing? What's happening? So it's kind of one thing to think about yourself and how things are going to look moving forward, but what it looked like for my children, my adult children, was a bit unsettling on my end, because she made that move. Now she's living in a different state. She wanted to go to start school when she got there, and then the school shut down. Mm-hmm. And now where's she going to live, and what's that going to look like? And kind of some similar situation with Hayden. He kind of just got to a point where what am I doing? I have nothing really happening, nothing going on. And thankfully, some of you know, but Hayden ended up going into the Marine Corps and actually is graduating from Marine Corps boot camp today. So yes, praise God. So, and he's doing so well. So just being, you know, just having what that's looking like for my adult children was definitely a bit unsettling in me. But again, that's going back to trusting God's plan for them and my children. And in fact, some of the things that I had been praying for, I didn't know it would look like this, but some of the things I prayed for my children the year previously kind of led up to what God brought them through this year. So it's pretty interesting how that worked for our family.
Yeah, that is definitely interesting. I think looking at families with adult children, and I'm glad that you kind of mentioned that, it's so true that it's so difficult to watch them kind of go through, because it's not like, you know, they're kind of moving on with their lives. They're making career choices, life choices, school choices, you know, different things. And it's so hard because they're still so young. But at the same time, you know, like your kids are kind of, you know, early 20s. And, you know, I have two that are kind of in that same kind of age range as well. And it's so difficult to kind of watch them have to maybe adjust things, or, you know, like you said, Haley, she had already made the decision, and then, you know, everything, the whole, you know, pandemic started and all of that. And so you're so right. It's difficult to watch them, but then at the same time, it's such a blessing to see them, like you said, take some of those lessons and maybe the way that God had prepared them to now have to do some of these adjustments and make some of these choices. It is a huge blessing to watch them do that. So that's really cool.
Yes, it has been.
Yeah. Thanks, Kathy. Laurel, what has kind of some of the unique challenges that you've kind of seen within your family, but then maybe also with some of the families that you're working with in the school?
Well, I guess with my family, just with Luke has been staying home since we shut down in March, so right around spring break. So we sent our kids on spring break and then they never came back. So the kids actually were really worried about taking Christmas break and Thanksgiving break, because several students, and I am in a K-6 building, were kind of made the comment, they're like, Miss Scott, the last time they sent us on break, they didn't bring us back. And so just thinking about, for a lot of students that we deal with, and a lot of students across the country, being in school is their safe place. And that's something that's consistent for them. So being home, a lot of students struggle with not having food or warm homes and things like that. So just providing that safe haven here in Haven, Kansas, where I live, has been something that's just been a blessing. It's been a challenge for our family, just because Luke's been home. But that's been a huge blessing for us, just because he's been home. So I've been able to be at work. And I have a 4-year-old who's in half-day preschool. And so she loves that. She wakes up every morning and she asks if it's a school day. And if we tell her no, then she asks if it's a church day. And so then if we tell her no, she says, oh, I hate stay-home days. So, but just being able to have that little bit of flexibility with him being home, it's been good for him to get out. That's something I think that has been a different dynamic for him. He's used to being the one that goes to work every day. And I actually encouraged him a couple weeks ago because he seemed to be really frustrated with his job. And I said, I think you need to be around people more, because he's an introvert naturally, and goes downstairs and he puts on his headset with a microphone and it's got all these computer screens. I tease him and tell him he looks like a big gamer guy because he's got all these screens going. But he decided to go in once a week to the office, and he's like, man, I just didn't even realize how much I needed that connection. Whereas now I have it all the time and I love it. I can't imagine what it would be like to go back to not being in person and just being my school here. We're one of the only schools that's actually in person every day. And we've been able to do that by changing our learning model to make sure that we have only 10 kids in a classroom. And actually, what we've done, there's our school, and then there's a charter school. We have been able to utilize our community. So the charter school is at a Mennonite church, and so the 7th and 8th graders are at the Mennonite church, and my 6th graders have actually moved over to the Baptist church where we attend across the street. So it's really neat to be able to have the churches accommodate us and welcome us. it's kind of a different situation, but it's been a huge blessing.
That's a huge blessing to your community, I'm sure, as well, just to kind of come together and be able to support each other in that way. And I think you spoke probably to what's been a challenge for a lot of people is having to adjust even work situations, like you mentioned for your husband. And I think a lot of people are probably facing that challenge as well. Thanks for sharing that, Laurel. Amanda, what about your family, or even just in general, what would be some unique challenges that the family is facing during a time like this?
So for my family specifically, the togetherness has been both a blessing and a challenge. We have been able to spend a lot of good quality time together because we're not busy ferrying around to different activities, but all of that togetherness has come at a cost. And sometimes I can't just say it's the kids. Sometimes we all are feeling that closeness and we just need some space. So I just try to remind myself to just have grace with the kids and with the things that they're going through. And hopefully by modeling that, they will then pass that on and have, some of that allowance for their siblings as well.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's a challenge, spending too much time together.
Yes.
Julie, how about you guys?
Well, for us, we're kind of in the same boat with Kathy and Haley. Two of our kids got engaged in September within about 8 days of each other. And now their wedding dates, one is May 1st at a ranch in Montana. And the second one is May 28th in Oklahoma. The first one's going to be they wanted to get married in a hayfield, and now it's going to be actually at the parents' house. And the second one is going to be kind of a Cinderella wedding, apparently at a country club. So 2 very different kind of venues. And then our middle daughter, Keely, who's been married for 2.5 years, is talking about having babies.
Wow.
So, but they all 3 want to have kids at the same time. So I guess dealing too with all the COVID fear, that it's like, okay, guys, coming from a nursing point of view, it's like, and listening to all kinds of doctors, and not listening to doctors, national spokespeople kind of doctors who seem to do a lot of flip-flopping, i.e. Fauci. It's like, okay, if you look at the numbers, nobody's getting influenza. Nobody's dying of heart disease. Nobody's dying of cancer. Everything's being counted as COVID. So kind of let's just relax and look at this a little bit. And God is still God. And having babies is going to be, you just need to plan for that. And I guess walking them through trusting, even with wedding venues. Okay. It's okay to plan to for instance, having the wedding, Betsy's wedding is at the family's ranch. So her husband, her fiance, Luke, actually wanted to put on the invitations. Don't bother coming if you think you have to wear a mask. Some stuff they won't really. But I think just walking them through all that life is going to go on, and our trust needs to be in the Lord. And then something Kathy alluded to with Chad and Amanda did as well is I've been learning the value of being the praying wife and trying to keep my mouth shut and not snap back or just like, okay, having the gentle, quiet spirit on the outside. Inside, it's like not necessarily gentle and quiet, but
that can be challenging for sure. Yes. I think a couple of us have mentioned that. So thanks, Julie. Heidi, you have a daughter that's in the military as well, just like Kathy mentioned about Hayden. How has that been kind of uniquely challenging for your family during this season?
This past year, her school for operations specialist was delayed. So that went from summertime to the fall. And then not being able to really see her. She was on, they were only allowed to travel within so many miles of where she was stationed at in Virginia. So she was all the way across the country and that was hard, just not feeling like I could be there for her or be there with her. That was just kind of challenging. And also for her, because, she had been looking forward to going to school in the summer. And we found that out in March with the beginning of COVID. So it was pushed to the fall, but all in God's timing, really. So she was able to go to school in the fall, and she graduated, and we weren't able to go because of COVID. So that was kind of challenging all in itself, not being able to visit our family during that time. My husband's mom and my mom are both older, and so you have to worry about the health risk there. And then also my husband and I have a business, and so we've just had to become creative with that. And that's been a little bit challenging, but again, God has just provided for all of our needs, and we just had to trust, which was not always the easiest thing for me.
Yeah, that can be difficult. You guys have done such a good job with your business too, just being creative, like you said, with that and advertising, and just kind of doing the maybe more the online orders and things like that. You guys have done such a good job with that. It's been kind of fun just to watch you kind of be creative in that way too. Yeah. And your family is kind of in a unique situation as well, in that you have a younger daughter, middle school age, and then you have, you had a senior last year, and then you also have a son who's trying to navigate schools and college and all of that. What's that been looking like for you guys?
Yeah, so we have 3 children, and they age range from 12 to 22. So at the end of last school year, we had our oldest was graduating from community college with his AA degree, and then a high school senior graduating, and then our daughter was in middle school. So that was really hard because they both of their graduations were virtual, and then for my son that was graduating from high school, so many of those special milestones that you look forward to. We were hoping, just kind of they kept dangling it, and well, maybe we'll postpone it again. And so when those things all became the reality that they just didn't get to happen, that was hard. And just, different things for my daughter too, of things she was looking forward to, watching your children, be sad and disappointed about things and not being able to, I couldn't control it. Again, it was that relinquishing of control. I wanted to fix it and make it better for them, but it was one of those where I couldn't, and so that as a mom, I felt was really, really hard. Also, my husband had retired the August of 2019. So he retired from the Marine Corps. So we were already adjusting from that. I mean, that he was in the Marine Corps for 22 years. So that alone was a really big life change. So we were already, kind of adjusting to that. And he had recently started a new job. So just kind of more time all together, like we've talked about, and logistically, working from home, and then having kids Zooming and scheduling that and making sure, all the different digital devices could handle all of that. That kind of, proved to be a little bit of a challenge. And then also our oldest, he's an EMT. So there was the COVID, concerns there, with him and his safety as well too. And our middle son, he works in a restaurant. So with California, we've had a lot of the go back and forth of shutting down, opening, shutting down. And now there's not even patio service. So he really hasn't worked for about a month. He checks the schedule every day, and he's not on it, so that's been hard. So just, it's hit us all a little bit differently. But it's been neat, we're talking about God providing, and, he's had to be resilient, and he's come up with different ways. So he started doing Instacart, being an Instacart driver, and, just trying to make it work whatever way possible. So it's been neat to see them kind of navigate the challenges themselves and kind of become resilient. I think they're really learning a lot, whether they realize it or not yet. They're really learning a lot of that. So, but yeah, definitely some challenges.
Yeah, and really trying to find ways to be creative themselves in, school and work and all of that. Yeah, that's good.
Also, my oldest is planning a wedding as well. So he got engaged in the summer last year.
That's right.
So that's scheduled for June, but in California. So again, that's another one of those, we're kind of relinquishing control, and, we'll have to see how that all works out. But it's, it's exciting, but also a little daunting given the limitations that we have right now to go places and things like that. So. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely interesting.
Yes, definitely interesting.
Shannon, what you kind of have already mentioned kind of the ages of your kids, having a senior this year, kind of all high school age kids. What kind of unique challenges have you guys faced?
Ours was more, our kids were very social, and, being in the field that I am and with the job that I do, knowing how important it is to still have those social interactions, engagements. And so it's truly finding that balance of, having them be able to interact with their friends and, what is this going to look like? Do we keep them in the home this week? They want to go play basketball and you're like, oh, but, so it was just truly being smart, as smart as possible, trying to teach them, okay, if you're going in certain environments, you might want to have you wear that mask, or, being open and honest as well as with their interactions. Cause we did have a couple times where some of their peers had came in contact with COVID, and how are we going to, do the isolation process is, or not isolation, cause I don't like that word, but the quarantine process. But another unique factor for myself is that my job, I still worked. And not only did I work, it increased because I work embedded with the Marine Corps. I'm with the Marines. I'm in a regiment, battalions now. And so the Marine Corps doesn't stop. And so all the programs that my job was to bring them in to provide education and prevention went away. And so that upped all the trainings I had to provide, still trying to put in COVID factors of going from 30 people in a classroom to now 9 or 10 or 11, where you do that class once a month. Now it was happening 2 and 3 times a week to make sure the Marines were still getting what they needed. And that fell on me. And so my kids are home now. And it was a blessing that my husband was there. He is retired. But I wanted to be there with my kids, and yet still trying to find that balance, and being in an environment also where, okay, I have, all these young people, and we're trying to figure out as leaders, how do we keep them socializing, but safe, 18, 19, 20-year-old Marines. So it's been unique challenges, but it's also really pushed people to be creative, push people to really tap into some areas they've never had to, and definitely communicate and consistently try to do things better and safe. And so, so all of it being unique, but that social factor has been a major impact. We know people, we're built for relationships, and how do we navigate all of that with all the COVID restrictions and being told to stay home, and so it's been pretty unique challenge. So
in our family, we have just the way you're talking about your kids being more social, it's very challenging. Our family, we're mostly okay with not being with people, except for one of our girls, Molly. She's very social. She likes to be around people. And at one point during this whole time, she said, Mom, I'm not trying to be mean, but I want to see people not in our family. I want to spend time with people that aren't in our family. And I totally get that now. And I think for me, that's one of the things that I've learned through all of this, that, I have desire to be around people more. And I kind of feel like maybe it's made me a little more social, and that's not a bad thing. Now, just kind of continuing that thought a little bit, specifically talking about our kids, how have you maybe walked your kids? And Shannon, you kind of already shared a little bit about this. You kind of the way that you respond, you noticed kind of that affected you, the way your kids are, but how have you walked your kids through this? Like when we think about just some of the, maybe the holidays being a little bit different, the way politics are right now, are those things that you guys talk about at home? Or do you kind of just let your kids form their own, get the information themselves? How have you walked your kids through maybe just kind of the holidays kind of being the way they were, the kind of the political climate we're in?
Right. So for us, my kids are very aware. They're in especially a school system where kids post a lot. Everyone has opinions. And so it's truly made us really sit down more than what we've used to talk about different things, meet them where they are. In our house, we do have a bunch of different views. And so it's been actually kind of neat to see my kids grow into themselves, but also bringing everything back to the foundation of, our beliefs, Christianity, God has been, we've focused on that a little bit more. And I think because, the kids are home and I'll be honest, after having my kids home and how nice they've been to each other and they actually communicate and they talk. And I'm like, wow, you guys didn't do this when school was in. I'm thinking about homeschooling you guys, And so, we've had some talks. We've set up, family meeting times. We do have kids. Our kids are kind of in and out because they actually have picked up jobs. When they're in school, we don't require that they have jobs, but because they've been kind of online and they're mainly online, they have no option of going in class because we have one of the biggest public schools with thousands of kids. They picked up jobs and, something that wouldn't have happened before with 16, 17 year olds. So it's been good to be able to see them grow as little young adults, being able to have conversations that truly, I won't say it wouldn't have happened, but we're more intentional about it and bringing it to their awareness, how this is impacting them. What are people saying in their social network? What do you believe about what they're saying? What is truly the truth? Or, so it's been, that's how we've done that. And sometimes I'll bring it up sometimes. And because how we've done it with like, let's have a family meeting every Sunday night. Did you see what's going on? It's all on social media. Now, when they see things, they bring it to us like, Mom, did you see this? And we can talk about it. Or, oh, my friend said this, or yeah, this is not okay. And so it's opened up them to be able to come to us as well when something comes up. And I don't know if that truly would have happened if they were in school right now, because they would be going to each other, to their peers, and to their friends. And, especially with the time they spend in school. And so, it's been nice to have that.
Yeah, definitely having that door of communication open a little bit more is so important just to help them process. Especially, I feel like you were mentioning the ages of your boys, they're in that kind of, they're trying to still figure out, life and processing all of those things. And it's so good to keep that door of communication open. It's really good, really good. Kathy, you mentioned a little bit how, obviously Chad is more involved in the political climate for the sake of making sure our veterans are taken care of. But like with your kids, how have you walked them through some of that? And you mentioned a little bit kind of how, Hayden went to boot camp and, Hunter's with you guys there in Texas. Haley moved to Minnesota and she's kind of starting her life there. But how, even given all of that and how you guys are more spread out now, how have you just maybe been able to walk them through some of those things?
Yeah, my situation's a little different with that for sure. The Hunter's pretty in the know of what's going on, and his opinions pretty much line up with our opinions. So it seems like when we do talk, it goes really well. Haley, on the other hand, she is living in Minnesota and she does have some different opinions. And her and Chad are a lot alike. So they have no problem debating. So that's been a little bit difficult to watch, and kind of be the person that wants to kind of, I guess, be the referee or the peacemaker in the midst of it. It's kind of like, I just want to tell Chad, it's okay. It's okay that Haley has these different opinions. So she's not really coming to us, asking us for advice or asking us what's going on, but she's really it's really kind of more bumping heads, which really kind of stinks to be having that situation with your adult children. But in the midst of them and us all learning how to talk politics with our children that believe something a little bit different, Haley was home for Christmas and it was such a nice visit. And when she left, she said it was so nice to be able to have, I don't know how she said it exactly, but political interaction with Dad and it be okay. So it took them all year to, so nice. I was, I just try to support them both in the midst of that, because when you have a different opinion than your child, it can cause a lot of a wedge. It can cause a wedge in your relationship when you believe in something so strongly. So it's been a little difficult on our end, and then Hayden with him, He's a little bit more quiet, but will ask questions and kind of go and research it on his own. So I've seen him more inquisitive, but in a quiet way. So on our end, it hasn't been so much educating them on what's going on, but more so just, for me, just trying to be a referee in that situation if there is anything.
Yep. And Julie, I feel like, is kind of in a similar boat. As she mentioned, she has adult children who are also, engaged, kind of doing other things. Julie, do you have anything to add to maybe kind of what Kathy said, how it's been kind of similar for you, probably in a lot of ways that she mentioned, but how has that been for you to walk your kids through that at kind of the ages they are?
So politically, all three of our kids and all three of their spouses we're all on the same page. So that's been kind of fun to have family chats going in that regard. What's a little outside that, but it's been very cool, is we have reconnected with one of our nephews who is down in Phoenix, Arizona. And all this happened because of my mom passing away in October. But his eyes have been really open to a lot of things that weren't before. But the coolest thing, he's really started walking with Jesus. And so we've seen a complete 180 in that guy. I want to say kid, but he's 31 years old. But it's been so refreshing. And he is actually, there's a little bit of a block with his own dad as far as their beliefs. So he's really connected with Bill, and then texting with Bill and I, and with Bill and our son Tyler and I. It's just been really fun to not even so much politics, but really about the Lord, just which that's been the coolest thing.
That's good. Yeah. Heidi, you have an adult daughter as well. And so what about for her? How's that been for you to kind of walk her through this time? I know you said communication has been kind of interesting. You haven't been able to be at some of her, just her major life events that she's kind of been through over the last year. But how has that been for you to walk her through this time?
I'm just trying to help her to stay focused. I think politically speaking, she is on top of it way more than I am, being that she's in the service. So she's like all about that. And of course, Mike is definitely into the news. So I don't think it's necessarily that we've had to lead her or guide her. We're all on the same page, and we just have been walking through it together. Discussions have been good. So it's been kind of a smooth walk for all of us, really.
Yeah, good. Anne, kind of having similar, I guess you have more adult down to middle school, but what's that been like for you to walk them through this time?
Yeah, we've had really good discussions. We've tried to be fairly open with them about everything going on. And one of the things we've used all of that to do is try to help them to just see things from a biblical perspective and kind of just remind them of the importance of why it's so important to be grounded in their faith. So that's been something that's been neat to be able to use, this kind of climate that we're in, for good. But just the fact that we're living through history, I think, we're really living through some, if you even look back at just everything that transpired in 2020, it's like, really, that month happened, and that happened, and that happened. So, we've tried to be pretty intentional about having those conversations, but also trying to find balance. You can have too much of, the news on, and too much of social media, and too much of those discussions where you're seeing that everybody's getting, uptight or anxious. And so just kind of having the balance of knowing when to turn that off. I'd also say we've really, and I'd say even more recently, I've been paying more attention to just kind of the emotional and, spiritual wellness of everyone in the family. That's taken a toll, and especially on the younger ones, who are still learning what that looks like to navigate those feelings. So I've tried to be a little bit more open lately it's led to conversations where I've shared, I've struggled with depression. This is what's helped me. Just being a little more open that it's okay to have feelings of disappointment, to be frustrated, to even be angry. What do you do with those feelings? How do you handle them in a constructive way? Here's some tips. So I feel like that's been really important and something that I don't know. I might have not paid as much attention to. I don't know that they would have shown the signs as much as they are now. And so it's led us to have those conversations. And I think those are the things that we don't always think to teach our kids. And then they become adults and they don't necessarily know how to navigate the ups and downs of life. So I felt like that has been something that's been a positive out of a negative. And then also just every day kind of has a little bit of a Groundhog Day type feel to it. So
Right.
we've had to try to be a little creative about, people need to have things on the calendar to look forward to, so what can we, within our limitations, create that they can look forward to? So we've done like, pizza on Friday nights, or we watched a lot of movies that have like multiple like sequels, so we could be like, okay, tonight we're watching this one, then we're watching that one. So that's been fun. Early on, my husband was taking my daughter on walks every day or riding bikes and things just to get her out of the house. And so that was good. So just kind of being intentional about things to look forward to, I think has really been important. So that's been working for us.
That's a really good point. And especially I like the point that you made about, kind of helping maybe our little bit of younger kids that don't maybe have such an understanding as the older kids. And I'm kind of same situation as you with, I have a 12-year-old and an 11-year-old, and they don't grasp everything in the same way as maybe, our kids that are a little bit older. And so I'm just helping them to understand. And I think you're so right in a way that maybe we wouldn't have thought about, if we weren't in the situation. And that's something we try to do as well, is just try to be more intentional about how we communicate the changes and maybe some of the things that are happening with maybe the younger kids that are not quite grasping that. So I like that you made that point. Thanks, Anne. And just talking about, younger kids a little bit, Amanda, what's that look like for your family to kind of walk your kids through this time, with the holidays and politics and all of that? What's that look like for you to walk them through this?
So we have, not me, but we have a 10 and 11-year-old, and we have a 15-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And our 10 and 11-year-old, while they all have struggled with the lack of social interaction, I think that the 10 and 11-year-old have probably felt it the most, because the older one, our older child is responsible. She has a phone. She can text her friends and talk to her friends, and whereas the younger kids, they don't have that access.
Right.
Is free for them. So we have been a little bit more purposeful about carving out time to just have one-on-one interaction where they're getting a little bit of, where they're getting more of that feedback. Like Anne said, having things on the calendar is important. The kids look forward to certain things that, happen every Saturday. My son goes to jujitsu with dad, and every night at 6:30, my youngest takes the dog on a bike ride with her dad. And so those are just like the little things that they look forward to every day. Our 15-year-old, on the other hand, is figuring out her place in the world and trying to figure out what her point of view is on everything. And so she's interested and she is engaged, and we've had really good, stimulating conversations about the things that have happened over the past year, what our point of view is, and I don't want to say defending our point of view, but presenting it to her with perhaps a biblical background to why we believe certain things that we believe.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not kind of following the masses, but we're more kind of following the truth. And so those have been really good to have those sort of conversations with our oldest. And I also would say that too, there's been conversations that have come out because of the technology access that our two youngest do have, that otherwise they would not have at this age. And so there's been a lot of opportunities for us as parents to just be open and just try to explain to our children, and maybe they can see there are reasons why we have certain rules, and it's just opened the door up for more conversations, deeper conversations that we might not be having at this age.
Right.
So.
Yep. You're so right. The use of technology has definitely increased, and that has brought some interesting challenges to the home. So yeah, you're so right about that. Laurel, you have kids that are, Amanda has, her youngest is 10, and you have kids that are even just a little bit younger than that as well. So what has that looked like for you to walk them through this time?
Well, so my youngest is 4, and then I have a 6-year-old little boy, and he's full of life and dinosaur sounds. And then I have an 8-year-old, and my oldest is about to turn 10 next month. She's very excited. And just being with them and being home, we live on a farm out in the country, a little hobby farm, and we don't have neighbors. So being home, that at the beginning was very different for them, because they'll always say, can we have somebody over after dinner, or can we have a play date? Because when your closest neighbor is 1.5 miles down the road, you schedule that stuff. So just listening to that kind of subside over time and having those conversations, and just, well, we can't right now, and a lot of heartbreak, a lot of tears. But children are so resilient, and they have so much understanding about things, and just having little conversations. And one of my favorite times at night, every night, my husband and I tuck all of our kids in. Our girls still share a bedroom because nobody wants to move to the basement. They like the idea. They just don't actually want to do it. Having their own space would be great, but they don't want to sleep alone. And so we tuck them in. We always talk. We have our time of prayer requests, and tell me one thing good that happened throughout your day. And then we sing some praise hymns and songs of their choice, and they have their favorites. But just that has been something, like, as I came back into work and I was working late, or if I have something going on and I'm not there, I'm at a board meeting, I have to go in, and they wait. I mean, and so just listening, like the things that have started out just becoming, well, we just want to spend some time and pray with you guys, and now just being home and being content in that is becoming, it seems like life's been a little bit simpler. And then as far as politics, it's always interesting when kids come to school, the little things they say about where things come from and who's responsible, and if only, and you just know that, little ears are always listening.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been a very good reminder for me, as my 4-year-old repeats things that I think I may have only said once, but telling teachers what they say. And we just had an example the other night in our home where there was hurt feelings by a friend. Well, my mom said this, and was very hurtful. So just being mindful about the things that come out of our mouths at all times has been something that Luke and I have really, really focused on, just because they listen all the time, and they are kind of a little mirror for us. So but just, relating it to God is in control, and it is okay. And we know that we will be okay, and we don't have to be fearful. But I mean, just enjoying those times together has been something that's just been a huge blessing for us.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that about the kids always kind of listening to you. I think we forget that sometimes, really, no matter what age they are, they're really always picking up kind of our, the things that we say and habits, and they kind of form their own, maybe worldviews, or even things that they, think about all these things from us when we don't even realize it.
Absolutely.
I'm going to start this next question with you, Laurel, since you're already up. But all of us here, all the ladies that are joining us on our women's programs team, have been married to someone in the military who are now veterans. Some of the ladies here joining us have been in the military themselves. And Laurel, you are one of those ladies. You were in the Marine Corps. But what is something that you wish that you knew either before you joined the military or before you married someone in the military, either on a spiritual perspective or a relational perspective? What's something that you wish you had known ahead of time that you would say to someone that is just starting out in that way?
I think I remember people telling me that marriage is hard, and it's hard, and then I always thought like, oh gosh, I don't really think it's that hard. But then what I realized was that I was not really working on my marriage. It's very easy just to live with someone, just to reside together, but working on a marriage is challenging, because there's two people, and two people living together long term, and we're different people, we're raised different, and all these things that you're just like, wait, where did this come from? You do what? You kind of come up every now and then, but just being patient with one another, extending grace, and being a listener. That's one thing that is one of my constant goals, is listening to hear rather than to respond, because it doesn't benefit anyone just to, we all know that person who says, oh, I need this, or oh, I need that, and oh, me too. So just listening to hear rather than to respond has been something that I've really worked on over the last few years, and just getting to know my partner and my spouse on a deeper level, a more spiritual level, and allowing him to be the spiritual leader of our home, and just being thankful for that and praising him for that, because that is something that I have realized is not common. Right. And I'm just so thankful for that, and that the role that he plays in that.
Yeah, you're right. That's not very common. Heidi, what are your thoughts on that? What do you wish you had known before you married someone in the military?
I guess the biggest thing would be uncertainty. You think when you're young that you're getting married and you're going to just live this wonderful life and be together all the time. Well, when you marry someone who's in the military, you're not always together all the time, and that's probably a good thing. But seriously, there were times where I felt like I was a married widow, and there were times where it was very lonely. And so I guess being able to share that information and just life lessons that I've learned along the way with younger girls, just maybe opening their eyes a little bit that it's not all peachy all the time. Just being married in general isn't like that. So let alone you throw in the military aspect, and deployments and workups and all of that. So that was a little bit challenging, I would say. And of course, Mike was in the Marine Corps when we first got married, and then he got out and then re-enlisted 13 years later. So that was a big span of time in between. So that just brought on more challenges, because then we had a teenage daughter, and just, I guess, loneliness was a big thing. But,
yeah.
And with that being said, it also allowed me to draw closer with my relationship with the Lord, because I didn't have my husband to technically rely on. So my relationship with the Lord grew stronger through that time as well.
Yeah, that's good. What about you, Kathy? What's something that you wish you had known before, ahead of time? If you could talk to your younger self, what would you tell her?
Well, if I would have known that all his medals and awards and his paddles and all of that stuff would be put on the wall before a picture of me would be put on the wall in his office, maybe I would have thought different. No, I'm just kidding. One thing that I share when we do the women's program is about my mother, and my mother always telling me to just pack my stuff and leave when it got hard, just pack it up and go. And that was her way just to get out of it. And she was married and divorced 3 times. And if she was still alive, she'd probably be on her 5th or 6th marriage and divorce, because that was her way of thinking. So instead of hearing something like that, I wish I would have heard never to give up from the beginning. That giving up wasn't an option. And I don't mean just throwing in the towel and leaving, but I'm giving up emotionally, spiritually, physically, just all of that with the silent things that you can just kind of do in the privacy of your own home, you know, turning your back on your husband because you're just tired. So I wish I would have heard somebody tell me not to give up, and then I wish I would have been willing to maybe be more adamant about getting the advice from other women, especially other older women have been married for a long time, to guide me in that area. So in fact, I think, I don't even know if I show it to you, but if it's backwards, but you know, I have a lot of things that says never give up, love never fails, because it really truly means something to me after coming through a horrible time with Chad, coming through on the other side and fighting for our family moving forward. Because I don't know what was harder, going through the things that we went through, or coming through on the other side, the fight for our marriage, the fight to keep our family together. And so, yeah, never give up.
Yeah, that's good. I think we can all just continue to remember that moving forward too. That's kind of like a daily reminder. Yeah, that's really good. Thank you. Amanda, what's something that you wish you had known before you married someone in the military? Your husband was in the Marine Corps for a long time.
He was. He served for 22 years. And one of the things I wish I had known was I had a pretty strong support group in my family, where I grew up, our home base. But I always was concerned about what it would be like the next place. My husband would have a job to go to, and he would inevitably make friends, but I felt like a lot of times like I was kind of drifting in the wind, and I didn't know, you know, where to go. I wish that somebody had told me back then how important the friendships and the relationships that I would have with the women that I would meet along the way would become in my life, and how, you know, the friends that I have made through the years, through the duty stations, when we're traveling and we meet up again, and it's been 10 or 15 years since we've seen them, we pick right back up where we left off. It's like there wasn't a day in between seeing each other. And I think that's pretty special to have that kind of connection. You get to, you know, we always lived in housing, and sometimes, you know, that can be a negative thing, but I think if you are, I don't want to say choosy, but if you're particular about where you spend your company and the people that you surround yourself with, I think it can be a really positive thing, because those people, even though they have different backgrounds and maybe different beliefs and all that kind of stuff, you have a lot of things in common with them, as far as you're away from your family, you're away, you know, your husband's gone, you're raising kids on your own. And there's a quick connection that can be made with those ladies that just seems to last. And I think that would have alleviated some of the concerns that I had as a young wife. And also, like, how many times do we move? You know, I wish somebody had told me, like, really, they make, like, moving is not fun and it's a lot of work. And so I wish somebody had told me about that.
That would be good to know, because it's always very romanticized, right?
Yes.
Yes.
It is not fun.
That's good. Julie, your husband served for a long time as well. What are your thoughts about this?
If I had to do over again, or if I was talking to somebody younger than myself or just coming in, the number one thing, especially if they're a follower of Jesus, is holding on to that word and really learning to speak the word, to pray the word over your husband, your marriage. But then, as some other people have alluded to, Amanda, I really picked up on some of what you were saying was reaching out to people, really realizing that whatever you're going through, somebody else has already gone through. And we let ourselves be, or I do, being more introverted, let myself be so controlled by fear sometimes, and realizing that we're not alone. If we have the courage to reach out, there's going to be somebody out there who's going to be able to completely identify with us and be able to help walk us through it. Or even the word says that the things we've suffered, we're able to turn around and go and help somebody else through that same thing. So not being afraid to reach out. And then a verse that I had used before Bill and I got married, James 1:2 was, consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you encounter trials of various kinds. Well, at the time I inserted Bill Coat for for trial. But it works with all kinds of situations, that we can look at things as, instead of, if I initially will stop when a problem comes up, instead of saying, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I instead say, okay, God, what are you going to do with this? Mm-hmm. And look at it as an opportunity for joy. Look at it as a exciting adventure to see how God's going to work it out. Hmm. And that would be probably my biggest things for advice.
Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it. It's an exciting adventure just to see what God's going to do. Mm-hmm. That's really great. I love that. Shannon, you were in the military yourself. What would you say to someone, maybe something that you wish you had known before you went into the military?
Okay. So I think, I was sitting here and listening and so many things came through my head. And so there's a lot of brokenness when people join the military. I know there's some people who do it for legacy. There's people who do it, want to serve my country, but there are a lot and a high population that join due to coming from broken homes, broken families. And, one of the things I wish I'd known is to really work on myself. You join the military and that gives you such a purpose that it masks all of the stuff that you carry. And so you meet someone like I did, me being in the Navy, my husband's Marine. I'm like, oh, he has goals. He's being a responsible adult. And so you jump all in and due to lack of knowledge and maturity anyway, you miss a lot of things. Mm-hmm. That if, had taken some time and had mentorship, maybe even knowing your own self-worth and identity, which, it's nice to say all those things. People are young when they get married. I was young, mm-hmm. But, you think about that as I needed to work on a lot of stuff I brought with me, just the same as my husband, and really taking some time to get to know him. But military things so fast, you move so fast. Our lifestyles are so up and down and you never know. And even how my husband and I got married was, we had planned a wedding for a year later, but then he got told, hey, you're going on this deployment. And in his mindset, it was, well, what if I don't come back? What if I die? Well, I want you to have this. I don't want to leave you hanging this way. So let's get married now because we're going to get married anyway, And so mm-hmm. It's that mindset too, that moved people into marriage really quickly. And so it's just really, is here nor there now. But it's kind of just knowing who you are, knowing that people are broken, knowing that the military can mask a lot of behaviors and also increase a lot of behaviors, anger, frustration, because that's kind of, especially, what I saw for Marine Corps specifically is that's considered part of the culture. You yell, you do all of these things and that make you who you are. And sometimes it's hard for people to turn that off when they get into their family dynamics. And one of the things I tell people now, I work with the Marines, I'm like, some of the same behaviors you guys do here, if you were to take that home, that would be considered abusive behavior. So, you might have to consider if that's something you'd want to do to anyone, no matter what. And so, and then just to add a little bit onto that, and then I'll close it, is distance doesn't make the problems go away. People deploy and there's a problem. And for that 6 months, 8 months, they're doing workups and you kind of put the problem or even your emotions to the side, because you want to be strong, especially as a woman, especially as a Christian woman. It's like, I'm gonna pray about this. I don't want to add more distress. I know I'm hurting over this, but he's trying to do his job and do all of these things. And so you're hurting over something that happened or an argument or a disagreement or some real true deep hurts. And you have to put them on the back burner. And so they're gone for a year or 6 months, 8 months. And then you come back and you might think it's better, but it's really not. And sometimes people pick up right where they left off. And actually it's more hurt, more pain. And so it's truly, I would give advice of if there's something that's there, be intentional about getting a mentor, getting another older couple in your church or going to counseling and facing those issues. And with all this technology, we could Zoom, we could do telehealth, we could do so many things, but really face it so you can continue to grow to be healthy. But the years, all that time, don't make the problem go away. And so it's just a couple of things, that I was really thinking about, like if I had known. And then the other question, if I had known, would I have listened? So,
Right. That's true. I think we do. Yeah, that's a good point because we like to say that.
Yes. Like if I'd known, I think people still, they did tell me stuff and you're like, oh, it's fine. He's got it together,
Yeah, that's true. Good point. I do like that you mentioned that you wish someone had told you or you had known to work on yourself, because I think a lot of us would probably echo that thought and maybe that desire that we had maybe been more focused on being the person that we're supposed to be, rather than, all these maybe expectations we had of our spouse or of our life, or, like Amanda mentioned the moving thing, and no one tells you it's going to be like that. No one tells you you're going to fall in love with this place and you're going to have to leave. And so I really like that you mentioned that, just being more focused on being the person that you're supposed to be. I think that would have helped all of us. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks, Shannon. That's good.
Of course.
And you kind of had a similar situation in your life as Heidi mentioned, where your husband was in the military, then he took a break and then kind of got back in. What would you wish maybe you had known before all of that happened in your life?
I guess just that the nature of military life, and actually I'd say life in general really, is full of ups and downs. It's got a lot of challenging times, really hard, challenging times, but also really amazing experiences. And I maybe wasn't conscious of it, but I think I thought early on, once I get this, whatever this was, it's going to be even keel, right? And I think I lived with that expectation for many years. So that every time there was this dip down, rise and fall of things, it was really hard for me. So just recognizing that there's going to be that mixture of that's just life, and especially military life is going to be just the peaks and the valleys. So understanding that, and understanding that to be resilient, to be spiritually resilient is really, really important in order to be content in all circumstances, in all of those peaks and valleys. And so just being, very intentional about prayer life and fellowship with other Christians and devotional time, I think that would have been really helpful for me to have a better grasp on. The other thing I would say as it relates to marriage is just consistent prayer for our spouses, the importance of that simple act. Prayer has a power to change things because we're tapping into the power of the only one that can change hearts. Also, I think just the exercise of that prayer often, from a selfish perspective, does so much more just to even change me, soften my heart, help me see my husband through the lens of grace and compassion in a different way, and just maybe help me to have a different perspective on the circumstances. So I think just that act of prayer is really, really important in all areas, but especially as a spouse.
Yeah, that's so true. We're going to move on to just kind of our last thought for the show. But something I wanted to ask you guys is, a lot of people are looking for hope right now. And that's a word that's kind of been, I feel like, floating around, especially, in churches, in the Christian community, is the word of hope. And how can we be hopeful in this situation in which we find ourselves as a country, as people, as Christian people? And what would you say to someone in, like 1 or 2 sentences? What would you tell someone of where they can find hope? And we'll start with you on that thought.
Speaking to my own life, I know I've never found hope or peace or contentment anywhere outside of my relationship with Jesus Christ. Not in anything, not in any status, not in any other person. So I would describe him as my hope anchor. And what I mean by that is just he's the reason why I can still feel that peace and joy, even when other things are, kind of drifting apart. So as long as I have him in my life, I can't drift too far one way or the other because I know he's got me. So, and I think I've just learned a lot, especially in the last several years, about suffering. We've had several family losses. And just life is full of storms. It's full of disappointments. It's full of suffering. It's full of sorrow. And so we need to have, our hope in Christ, because without him, you're not going to be able to have any of that peace. So I think that has been probably the biggest thing, just knowing that even if, and you can fill in the blank with whatever my worst case scenario is, even if, God is still good and he's still faithful and I'm secure in him, and that just has given me a ton of peace. So
good. Heidi?
Last night, my husband and I were talking, and the verse that he pointed out to me is in John 16:33. And it says, "These things I have spoken unto you, that in me ye might have peace. In the world ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world." And that just sums up so much of this past year, 2020. We can hope that we're going to have a better year. We can be hopeful that with the changes coming in our country, we can hope that it might be better. But in fact, our hope needs to come through Jesus Christ. We have to have that. And I just love that verse and thought it was really perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that thought too. Thank you. Julie, where would you tell someone they can find hope?
For me, it's the same exact thing. There is no hope outside of Jesus. There is no hope outside of the Holy Spirit. Not real hope. We listened to a guy last night, and he said, there's no kind of deal you can make with the devil. And he was talking in regard to Exodus 14. And I think it's kind of interesting. I think that sometimes me and maybe other people too think that, well, the things that happen in the Bible, we're not really going to have to go through that hard of stuff as they did. But there's nothing new under the sun, according to what God says in Ecclesiastes. So even when Moses is trying to lead the people of Israel out of captivity, and God directs them to the edge of the Red Sea, it sounded like there was about half the population that wanted to kill Moses, and he's going, God, what are you doing here? And I think it's kind of interesting that in Exodus 14, they're saying to Moses, "Why'd you bring us here to die in the wilderness? Weren't there enough graves for us in Egypt? What have you done to us? Why'd you make us leave? Didn't we tell you this would happen? Leave us alone. We'd like to be slaves to the Egyptians. We don't want to be corpses in the wilderness." And Moses told the people, "Don't be afraid. Just stand still and watch the Lord rescue you today. The Egyptians you see today will never be seen again. The Lord himself will fight for you. Just stay calm." And I think in our current situation, I think there are a lot of people that we're looking at President Trump as being their savior or salvation. There are other people who are looking at, potential President Biden being their salvation. Jesus is the only answer. And God says, just be calm.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, okay, how about if we just live like we believe? If this is what God says, how about if we just do it? How would our life be like if we decided to stand on what God actually says? Mm-hmm. Okay, he says, do not worry, do not fret. Okay, let's try to live life without worrying and fretting. And anyway, Jesus, all Jesus.
Yeah, that's good. I love that thought. Let's just live like all of that is true, and live like we believe. And that's kind of a thought that's come to my mind too. And there's so much hope and peace in that. So thanks for sharing that, Julie. Amanda, what would you tell someone where they can find hope?
So I immediately think back to when I was a strayed believer, and I had strayed from my faith. My dad discovered that he had cancer, and even then, even when my belief wasn't as strong in the Lord and my faith wasn't there in the Lord as it is now, I could see God at work because he brought me, a girl from Pittsburgh, together with a girl who had gone to college in Pittsburgh, and brought us together in the middle of the Mojave Desert and she worked with the top cardiothoracic surgeon, and that is who my dad was able to go and see. And then we had 12 more years with my dad. So just that little piece of just sometimes stopping and kind of recognizing what's going on around you. God is at work, whether you believe in him or not. And you might not have your hope in Christ yet, but if you look around you and you see where God is working, it could lead you to the truth that that is where your hope needs to be. It can't be in anything of this world. It has to be in God. And like you said, there's just a peace that surpasses all understanding when you find that. You can't explain it. I can't make anybody understand it any better than that. But I know that when I did not believe, I could still see that God was working. And that's how I would tell people who are looking for hope. Just stop and look around you. Look to see where God is working around you, because it's there. It might not be visible, but it's there.
That's good. That's good. Thanks, Amanda. Shannon?
A lot for me is the same, knowing that a lot of my hope is in Jesus. And I've had so many conversations. A lot of you know what I do, but people, find me, want to share opinions, get my opinion. And they're like, why aren't you stressed about this? Why? I'm like, oh, and sometimes I chop it up to them like, well, I've had a lot of other experiences that to me were kind of bigger than this. So, this is the least of kind of my worries or my concern, but it truly goes back to knowing that God is in control. What is worrying and stressing going to do for me? And I try to give that, it's the same, what I talked about my kids, listening and being there. And then I think a lot of it plays into, I hear so much that people go through that when I look at other things, it's like, okay, this isn't so big. I just talked to a person that lost all their kids, in a car accident. And so there's so many things where I'm like, no, this isn't it. This isn't the thing that's going to knock, take my hope away, or, the hope is there and it's in Jesus and in that relief in that. And I think we cannot discount when you do waver or when you do have anxiety and stress, or you're being fearful, to have a community of people who have hope in Jesus. And I think when you surround yourself, especially in this time of isolation, where people are so isolated, but when you surround yourself with people who are walking in that hope, so when you're kind of behind, or that day you wake up or you're fearful, and you're surrounding yourself, or have women just like this community, I know I can call any of you, and either you're listening, or you're just like, yeah, I'm dealing with that same thing, or let's pray together, or hey, this is how I'm handling this situation. You can't discount that, because we won't always be in this place of, walking on it. We have the hope, of course, we know it's there, but we live life too. And there are things that we see around us. Perfect example, yesterday, day before, I wasn't watching the news at all. So I had no idea what was going on. And so, because I was working, I went from one job to another, and I got a text. And so of course I'm clueless. So I'm happy, and, things are fine in my little world. And someone said, do you know what's happening? I'm like, no, I don't know what's happening. And they're like, how do you not know? And I'm like, I'm doing other things. And I turned on I opened Facebook, and I hadn't opened it almost, I do some stuff in the morning, but I really don't read a lot of stuff on there. And I opened it, and I saw all these posts about things, and then turned on the news, and I felt this weight that just really came in. And it's like, so it's important to know, but it's not important to overly consume yourself in what's going on. Because then I had to go right back to, you know what, let me turn this off. Let me focus on God. Let me control what I can control. There's a ton that I can't control. And let me not allow myself to get weighted down with these things when I say I have hope in Jesus. And that's where I needed to go back to prayer or talking to, you know, ladies who were encouraging and yes, had some fear, but let's pray for each other. And so I think not discounting a community of women or your church or family members who you can lean on when those times when you start to be weighed down by the worries and concerns of the world. And so that's what, yeah,
we need that reminder sometimes, just people around us reminding us where we find our hope. Yeah, that's good. Laurel, how would you communicate hope to someone that was looking for that?
One of the things that I think is absolutely amazing about this time that we are in is the way that we can communicate right now. And just the availability of technology. And sometimes that is not a good thing. But I know that there's been a couple times I've reached out to, you know, my community, which is a lot of you ladies. And, you know, we've had quick Zoom meetings here and there and just been able to, you know, just check in on each other. And so I think community is a huge part of it. And our community is so global these days. And that is so amazing. I know that I have tuned in on Facebook Live and watched church services at some of my previous churches and just been felt like I'm part of the community still, and people know me and people have been like, oh my gosh, you're joining us from Kansas. And that has been amazing. Just to be able to reach out to people, to know that, you know, if churches are closed, that they're still open, that they're still preaching the word of God. And you can find that anywhere now. And I think that that has been absolutely amazing. I on Sunday mornings, I love it because I just get my schedule out, you know, and I can tune in. And sometimes some churches have worship, some don't. But just knowing that God is still working through this time, and that and we're seeing it in different ways. And just because being in education, just because something is different and something is unfamiliar to us, it doesn't mean that you know, we can't be blinded by that and say, well, this is the way we've always done it. So this is the way it has to be. So every Sunday morning we have to be in church, or we have to be here because that's what we've always done. And just being open to those ideas of like how you can reach people differently has just been so encouraging. So whether it's Facebook Live or Zoom or things like that, finding your community and just knowing that God's grace is sufficient, and his power is made perfect in weakness. And we just have to know that. We have to rely on that. And just, if you have questions, just ask somebody. They'll tell you where to go. If you don't know, hey, you know, get a recommendation on Facebook of who's got services at what time. I know I've tuned in to Susanna. I've tuned in your guys' church a couple of times, and it has been awesome. So I finished mine and then I go to yours. So It's just been great. The availability is awesome.
Yeah, those are really good points. I think just finding our hope in even just watching other people do things. And I think there can be a lot of, you know, even when we have our hope in Christ, to see other people doing things for Christ can be encouraging to us and can kind of rekindle that hope within us too. So thank you. And then Kathy, how would you communicate hope to others?
Same thing. They're finishing up. I think I'm the last one to answer this question. So obviously we all agree that Jesus is where we find our hope. So I'm going to touch a little bit about, say you're new or you're not really sure what that looks like. One of the resources I use is an app called First 5, and it's pretty much a daily devotional. It's from Proverbs 31. And they put something new up every day, and it could take you 5 minutes if you wanted to. It never takes me that little bit of time, because I'll really get into the word of what we're hitting on that day. But I could totally tell a difference in my life when I'm not spending that time with God, when I'm not spending one-on-one quiet time with him. I'm thirsty. My home is a little upside down. I'm a little less patient. And so getting maybe that first step of just starting in your own daily devotional, your own quiet time with God, would be a first step for you. And that would, if you haven't tried it yet, that's going to be the first probably experience in your life that you find a true hope that is lasting. Because we're all created with a God-shaped hole that I think we all try and fill with something else before we truly understand the miracle that God has for us, his holy presence, that allowing him and inviting him into our heart every day can do for us. But not only, that kind of sounds selfish, because I mean, we were also created to also love him and to do the good works he designed for us, so that he wanted us to do. So anyways, just give it a try. Try to get in the word every day, and that's where you will find your hope in Jesus.
Thanks for sharing that, Kathy. That's kind of been for me for the last year, really just finding my hope in the Word of God has really helped so much. And like you said, it seems like your house is a little upside down when you're not getting in it every day. And it's so true. And I like that you address those that maybe this is a little bit new and maybe you don't quite know what we're talking about when you say, we find our hope in Jesus. And Kathy, thank you for just kind of addressing that. And there is really so much hope to be found in God's Word. And ladies, I just want to thank you for sharing your hearts today, for your insight. To all these things. These ladies are a really consistent part of our Women's Legacy Program team. And I just want to thank you guys for being a part. And for those listening to the show, our desire today was really just to be an encouragement, specifically to the women listening. And we hope that we've been able to do that today. If you know someone that could be encouraged by some of the things that we've said today, please share this out and share with them about the Mighty Oaks Foundation and just the hope that they can find in Christ. By coming to one of our programs, they can sign up on our website, mightyoakswarriorprograms.org, and hope that you will encourage them to do so and share this video out with them. And I just want to thank you guys for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
So thankful for that conversation and the wonderful people that we have involved in the work that we do here at the Mighty Oaks Foundation. Perhaps you watched that and you did not even know that we had a program for women, didn't know about our women's leadership team. This may have been a good introduction for you. Go ahead and check out the work that the Mighty Oaks Foundation does on our website, mightyoaksprograms.org. For those of you that are listening, watching, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. That would be awesome. If you're listening somewhere else, jump over there and check that out. Again, great to spend this time with you. Look forward to seeing you again next week.